T.D. Jakes, the leader of Dallas megachurch, the Potter's House, announced today that he will be stepping down.
2025 has proven to be one of the most challenging years in the life of Pastor T.D. Jakes. It began with a moment that no one saw coming. In what should have been just another powerful day of ministry, everything suddenly changed. The respected bishop, known for his strength and commanding presence, was rushed into emergency care after suffering a serious heart attack. For millions around the world, the news felt unreal. How could someone so strong, so full of life, be brought to such a fragile state in an instant? Doctors worked quickly. Emergency procedures followed, and for a brief moment, it seemed like time itself stood still. His followers prayed. His church held on to hope, and somehow, against the odds, he survived. But survival was only the beginning, because just as he began the long road to recovery, another storm started forming, one that wouldn't attack his body, but his name, his legacy, and everything he had spent decades building. I trust you for things I cannot even speak about. Show yourself in the midst of your people. Those words, filled with faith, reflected the mindset of a man trying to hold on during uncertain times. For a moment, it looked like things might settle down, but they didn't. Instead, a new crisis emerged, one that would send shockwaves far beyond the walls of his church. A situation so unexpected, so deeply personal, that it left many asking the same question: what happened, and why now? To understand how everything unraveled, we need to go back to the moment it all began. At the center of this unfolding story is a controversy that quickly turned into a legal and public battle. By early 2025, Pastor T.D. Jakes found himself facing a wave of accusations that would challenge not only his reputation, but also the trust of those who had followed him for years. The situation escalated in March, but its roots stretched further back. It started during an appearance on a popular online talk show, the Larry Reed Live Show. What seemed like a routine discussion took a shocking turn when a Pennsylvania-based pastor, Don Youngblood, made a bold and unexpected claim. Speaking openly in front of a growing audience, Youngblood accused Bishop Jakes of serious misconduct. The allegation itself was disturbing, but what made it even more startling was the timeline. According to Youngblood, the events he described had taken place nearly 4 decades ago. 40 years. For many, that immediately raised questions. Why bring something like this to light after so long? And why do it in such a public and explosive way? But the details didn't stop there. The claim involved a teenage pastor, adding another layer of sensitivity and concern to the situation. As the clip began circulating online, it didn't take long for it to go viral. Within hours, the story spread across social media, drawing reactions from supporters, critics, and curious observers alike. Some dismissed the claims outright, calling them baseless and poorly timed. Others weren't so sure. And as the noise grew louder, Pastor Jakes knew he had to respond. In an effort to address the situation directly, he appeared on national television, determined to share his side of the story. During the interview, he firmly denied the accusations. He described them as false, misleading, and completely without merit. According to him, the claims were not only untrue, but also harmful, especially given the timing, coming so soon after his health scare. He urged the public to think critically and not accept everything at face value. But in today's digital world, once a story takes off, it's nearly impossible to contain. And while he spoke with confidence, the conversation had already taken on a life of its own. Then, just when things couldn't seem more intense, something even more alarming happened. On what should have been a normal Sunday at the Potter's House, the atmosphere suddenly shifted. As Pastor Jakes stood at the pulpit delivering his message, something went wrong. Without warning, he collapsed. The congregation watched in shock as the leader they had looked up to for years was suddenly lying helpless before them. Panic spread through the room. Prayers filled the air. It was later confirmed he had suffered a heart attack. For those who witnessed it, the moment was unforgettable. For those who heard about it later, it was heartbreaking. And yet, in what many would later call a miracle, he survived. But even in that moment of relief, the challenges didn't stop. In fact, they were only getting started. Less than a day after that frightening incident, a major decision was made. Pastor T.D. Jakes filed a defamation lawsuit against Don Youngblood in a U.S. District Court. The move signaled that this was no longer just a public dispute. It had become a legal battle. In the filing, Jakes accused Youngblood of spreading false statements that caused serious harm, not only to his reputation, but also to his emotional and physical well-being during a vulnerable time. The allegations being discussed were severe. They claimed that the bishop had attempted to form inappropriate relationships with a teenage individual, allegedly offering financial support in return. To many, the claims seemed shocking and out of character. To others, they demanded closer examination. Either way, the situation had now reached a level that could not be ignored. As the case began to unfold, the response from Youngblood's side came quickly. His legal team argued that the lawsuit should be dismissed, pointing to laws designed to protect individuals who speak publicly on sensitive matters. But then, the situation took another turn. A new voice entered the conversation. Richard Youngblood, Don Youngblood's brother, stepped forward with a sworn statement. In it, he supported his brother's claims and added allegations of his own. He claimed that he, too, had experienced misconduct involving the bishop, allegedly during a church-related trip in the late 1980s. With this development, the story grew even more complicated. What had started as a single accusation was now becoming something much larger. Through it all, Pastor Jakes remained firm in his position. He denied every allegation. In official court filings, he stated that the claims were completely fabricated and intentionally designed to damage his name and influence. He described the situation as a coordinated attack, one aimed at undermining everything he had worked for. And as tensions continued to rise, it became clear that this story was far from over. Because behind the headlines and legal filings, another controversy was quietly resurfacing. One tied not to personal allegations, but to a powerful financial partnership that had once promised hope and now raised serious questions. As the legal battle intensified, another chapter from Pastor T.D. Jakes' past began to resurface, one that until now had remained in the background. This time, it wasn't about personal allegations. It was about a partnership. Years earlier, Bishop Jakes had joined forces with one of the largest financial institutions in the United States, Wells Fargo. The vision behind this collaboration was ambitious, and at the time, widely praised. The goal was simple, yet powerful: to uplift struggling communities. Plans were laid out to build affordable housing, improve access to essential resources, and create opportunities in neighborhoods that had long been overlooked. One of the most talked-about projects was set in Atlanta, a massive development planned on a 95-acre property that once served as a military base. The idea was to transform that land into something meaningful: homes, stores, community centers, a place where families from all walks of life could live, grow, and thrive together. To support this vision, Wells Fargo reportedly committed to raising up to $1 billion. At first, the partnership seemed like a perfect match, faith and finance coming together to create real change. But as time went on, concerns began to surface. Critics started pointing to Wells Fargo's history, one marked by serious controversies. In earlier years, the bank had faced federal investigations over its lending practices. Reports suggested that minority borrowers were often treated unfairly, sometimes being charged higher interest rates than others with similar credit profiles. The issue became so significant that in 2011, Wells Fargo agreed to a $175 million settlement. For many, that should have been a turning point, but it wasn't the end. Over a decade later, similar accusations began to appear again. In 2022, reports claimed that minority applicants were still being denied loans at higher rates, even when their qualifications matched those of other borrowers. The impact of these practices was devastating. Families struggled to secure homes, and the gap between different groups continued to grow wider. As these concerns resurfaced, people began to question the partnership itself. Why align with an institution carrying such a controversial record? And more importantly, was there more to the story? While there has been no evidence suggesting that Pastor Jakes was involved in any wrongdoing related to the bank's practices, his connection to the partnership placed him under renewed scrutiny. In the public eye, perception matters. And as details of the past came back into focus, so did the expectations placed on him as a leader. Reports indicated that the project, once filled with promise, had faced multiple delays over the years. Negotiations that began around 2014 seemed to stretch endlessly, with little visible progress. Deadlines came and went. Plans were discussed, revised, and postponed. At one point, local officials reportedly asked for proof that the development was actually moving forward. But updates were limited, and as time passed, many began to wonder whether the vision would ever become a reality. This raised a difficult question. If concerns about Wells Fargo were known, why continue the partnership? For some, the answer seemed simple: walk away. But in reality, the situation was far more complex. Large-scale agreements like this are rarely easy to exit. Contracts, financial obligations, and long-term commitments can make stepping away incredibly difficult. Leaving the partnership could have meant legal consequences, financial losses, and the collapse of a project meant to help thousands of people. Staying, however, came with its own cost: criticism, doubt, and association with a growing controversy. It was a no-win situation. As all of this unfolded, the weight of everything began to show. The health scare, the legal battle, the resurfacing controversies. Each one alone would have been enough to shake anyone. But together, they created a storm unlike anything Pastor Jakes had faced before. For decades, he had been seen as a pillar of strength, someone who guided others through their darkest moments. Now, he found himself standing in the middle of one of his own. And perhaps the most difficult part wasn't just the accusations or the headlines, it was the emotional toll. For many of his supporters, watching this unfold has been deeply painful. They remember the sermons, the messages of hope, the lives that were changed through his ministry. To see someone who had given so much now facing such intense scrutiny, it felt personal. At the same time, others continued to question and analyze every detail, searching for answers, clarity, or truth. In today's world, public figures are often judged not just by facts, but by perception. And once doubt enters the conversation, it can be incredibly hard to remove. Yet, through it all, Pastor Jakes has continued to stand firm. He has denied the allegations, he has taken legal action, and he has made it clear that he intends to defend his name. But even with that determination, one thing remains undeniable. This chapter has changed everything. Because sometimes, the most heartbreaking moments aren't just about what happens, they're about what it means. A health crisis reminds us how fragile life can be. A public accusation challenges trust, and a resurfaced controversy forces difficult questions about choices, partnerships, and responsibility. For Pastor T.D. Jakes, 2025 has become a year defined by all three. So what happens next? That's the question many are still asking. The legal case is ongoing. Public opinion continues to shift, and the full truth, whatever it may be, has yet to fully come to light. But one thing is certain: this story is far from over. And as it continues to unfold, it will not only shape the future of one man's legacy, it will also leave a lasting impact on the millions of people who have followed his journey, believed in his message, and stood by him through it all.